Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. Today, Twitter is promoting the latest climate disaster from the San Francisco Chronicle. California's Lake Tahoe is at an alarmingly low level. It's not a good sign. This week, a historically dry period in California will come to bear at Lake Tahoe, where the water level is expected to sink below the basin's natural rim. It's not a crisis, researchers and conservationists say, but it marks another extreme swing for Tahoe amid historic drought, wildfires, and erratic weather, all intertwined with climate change and becoming more prominent. Lake Tahoe's water level has been sinking for the past 2 years due primarily to drought, and it's about to cross a threshold no one is excited about. The last time water level in Lake Tahoe has fallen below the rim was during the height of California's historic drought in 2016. In 2016, the water level dropped almost 2 feet below the rim, and this year it's almost down to the natural rim. A few years ago, the water level at Lake Tahoe was very high after the wettest winter on record in California, which caused quite a bit of flooding. But the water is back to its natural level, and Twitter and the San Francisco Chronicle want you to believe it's a crisis caused by man-made climate change. Had they done any research, they would have known that 1,000 years ago, water levels at Lake Tahoe dropped by up to 60 feet. This huge drop in water level occurred during droughts which lasted for more than 100 years. And this information has been known since 1922, as reported by the Los Angeles Times in 1994. The New York Times reported the same story in 1994, Severe Ancient Droughts, a Warning to California. Beginning about 1,100 years ago, what is now California baked in 2 droughts, the first lasting 220 years and the second 140 years. Each was much more intense than the mere 6-year dry spells that afflict modern California from time to time. Sierra Mega Drought. About 1,100 years ago, severe droughts lasting decades depressed water levels in Sierra Nevada lakes, allowing trees to grow on exposed land. And the New York Times reported in 1992 about massive fires which used to sweep across many mountain ranges in California. Thomas Swetnam and co-workers have discovered that major conflagrations sweeping across many mountain ranges in California and the Southwest were long a common feature, occurring at least twice a decade and apparently linked to oceanic currents much further south, the so-called La Nina events that often result in droughts. Finding this synchronicity in fire events was a big surprise to us, he said. It tells me that western landscapes in pre-settlement era were very smoky places. The current drought and fires of the last 2 years are also associated with a La Nina event, so nothing's really changed over the past 1,000 years, except that the droughts are much shorter now and much less intense, and fire activity is also much lower than it was 1,000 years ago. Here's a similar story from the Fresno Bee from 1994 and a nice graph from the San Jose Mercury News. California has had very intense multi-century droughts in the past, which were of course due to natural causes. But climate experts say that the much shorter and much less intense droughts which California has now are man-made. Evidence from tree rings shows that drought was historically much more widespread in the American West than now, while the 20th century was wetter than normal. People who lived in California during the 20th century believed that was the normal climate of California, when it was actually the exception rather than the rule. This is Pueblo Bonito at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. 1,000 years ago it was the largest housing complex in the Western Hemisphere, but it had to be abandoned during the 13th century after 70 years of drought. Had the great Chief Biden been in charge, he could have implemented a carbon tax and a climate lockdown. 97% of climate academics agree that we can prevent future droughts by lowering CO2 levels back to what they were 1,000 years ago. The historical record shows that the claimed consensus beliefs of climate science have nothing to do with reality. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this junk science and superstition for the past 13 years. You can visit him, Curie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.